If Evelyn Monroe had learned anything in 6 months of widowhood, it was how to coexist with echoes. The chime of the wind bells outside her porch rang like the remnants of laughter. It was laughter she hadn't heard in ages. There was the soft click of a door easing open. Yet no one ever walked through. There was also the sound of a spoon stirring gently in a teacup. It was a rhythm she knew too well. But the man who created it would never do it again. The house by the lake remained untouched. It felt frozen in the moment he had walked out that final morning. His towel still hung from the bathroom door. A book lay open on the living room table. A folded corner marked a chapter he'd never finish. The scent of his cologne lingered faintly in the hallway. It felt like a whisper from a dream that wouldn't quite leave. She hadn't moved a thing. Evelyn feared that tidying up would mean erasing him. And erasing him meant admitting he was truly gone. It was autumn in Silverhaven. The lakeside town wore its grief well. The trees turned to brittle gold. The water stood still. It looked like a mirror that had grown tired of reflecting. Even the air held its breath. It mourned with her. This had always been Nathaniel's favorite time of year. He used to say fall reminded him of a woman he once loved. She was quiet. She was proud. She was impossible to forget. Now Evelyn wasn't sure if he'd ever meant her. She no longer trusted the language of love. Not after the late-night calls. Not after the half-truths. Not after that day. And yet, that morning, 6 months since the accident, her phone rang. Celia's name glowed on the screen. Evelyn froze. "I'm having my baby shower next Saturday," Celia said sweetly. "It would mean a lot if you came." Celia, her younger sister, the family darling, the storm wrapped in silk. Evelyn sat still for 5 full minutes after the call ended. Her heart tangled in something between suspicion and hope. The last real conversation they'd had was at Nathaniel's funeral. Even then, Celia had stood on the fringes. She was silent and unreadable. "Of course," Evelyn had replied. The words were automatic. Because Celia was still her sister. And the baby, at least on paper, would be her niece or nephew. She hung up. Her chest tightened. It wasn't anticipation. It was something deeper. Something darker. A knowing. Because despite the calm lake, Evelyn knew. Despite the curated smile Celia always wore like a crown, Evelyn felt it. She felt it in her bones. She felt it in her breath. She felt it in the ache just behind her heart. This wasn't a celebration. This was a storm. And it was heading straight for her. On Saturday morning, Silverhaven woke to a pale sun. A brittle wind swept through the streets. The scent of cinnamon from downtown bakeries drifted gently through the air. Volunteers were setting up booths in the town square. They were preparing for the annual autumn fair. Evelyn drove past them in silence. Her hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. Her parents' house came into view. The same place she had once called home. Now, it was a monument to favoritism and forgotten birthdays. The house looked exactly the same. It had a red tiled roof. Bougainvillea vines draped lazily over the porch. But the air felt different. The patio fireplace was already lit. The white cherub statue in the back garden was surrounded by pastel balloons. Blue and pink streamers fluttered nearby. A diaper cake sat proudly at the center, stacked like a wedding display. Evelyn stepped out of the car. Her arms were full of carefully wrapped gifts. One was a high-end baby heart monitor. The other was a handmade knitted blanket. She had woven every stitch during long, sleepless nights. Those were nights she didn't know how else to fill. She wasn't sure why she had bothered. Maybe it was instinct. Or maybe, deep down, she still wanted to be seen. She wanted to feel included. The front door swung open before she could knock. Celia stood there. She was radiant in a blush-colored maternity dress. Her smile stretched just a little too wide. "You came. I wasn't sure you actually would," Celia said brightly. "You invited me," Evelyn replied. She placed the 2 gifts gently on a table by the porch. "Not coming would be rude." "Oh, how sweet," Celia cooed. She lifted the heart monitor from the box. "Wow, luxury brand. I didn't expect that." Evelyn took a step back. She scanned the backyard. Guests were trickling in. Her mother was already pouring tea for the bridge club. Her father manned the grill. He was laughing with neighbors. No one turned to greet her. No one said her name. Everyone was orbiting Celia, just like always. Games start soon, Celia said, her eyes sparkling. I've got something really special planned. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. What is it? It's a surprise. Celia sang. You'll find out soon. Evelyn nodded, but her stomach tightened into knots. That familiar feeling crept in again. It was the same chill she had felt when Nathaniel missed their anniversary dinner. He had given a too perfect excuse. Something had felt wrong then. Something still felt wrong now. The party unfolded like any typical baby shower. Guests guessed the due date. They measured the belly. They played the melted chocolate in a diaper game. Evelyn smiled politely. She clapped when appropriate. She stayed on the outer edge of it all. But Celia kept watching her. Not warmly, not playfully. Her gaze lingered too long. It returned too often, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Then, after the final gift had been unwrapped, and the last round of polite applause faded, Celia stood. She cradled her belly. Then she tapped her glass with a spoon. Everyone, she said sweetly. Her eyes scanned the crowd. I want to thank you all for coming. It means the world to me to have you here. The guests smiled. Some nodded. A few murmured soft replies. But there's something else, Celia continued. Her voice rose just enough to command attention. Something important I feel ready to share. The air in the backyard shifted. It moved like a ripple through still water. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Celia turned. She looked directly at her sister. The baby's father is Nathaniel Hayes, Evelyn's late husband. The world dropped away. Silence followed, the kind that lingers after explosions. The kind that hums in your ears. The kind that makes the sky tilt. Evelyn couldn't move. She couldn't blink. She couldn't breathe. No one laughed. No one said, "You're joking, right?" Celia stood tall. Her smile was triumphant. Her eyes never left Evelyn's. Evelyn couldn't recall how long she stood there. The world blurred. The pink balloons. The sunlight catching the rim of wineglasses. The clinking of cutlery. All of it twisted. Like someone had dipped reality in water and stirred it. Everything went soft and unfocused. Everything except one thing. Celia's voice. The father is Nathaniel Hayes. Evelyn didn't just hear it. She absorbed it. It moved through her bloodstream and her bones. It split across the cracks forming in her ribcage. It felt like being cut open, slowly, deliberately, in front of an audience. I know this is a shock. But, don't. Evelyn's voice cut clean through the murmurs. It was sharp. It was final. The guests fell silent. Some were mid-sip, others mid-whisper. Celia flinched, but she didn't back down. I have proof. She stammered. She pulled her phone from the pocket of her dress. Nathaniel and we loved each other. I didn't want to hide it forever. She held up her phone. Photos flashed on the screen. Nathaniel and Celia. They had their arms around each other in a hotel room. Another photo showed them holding hands across a restaurant table Evelyn didn't recognize. He loved me, Celia said. Her voice grew steadier. She turned fully toward Evelyn. He was going to leave you for me. Evelyn took a slow step backward. Not because she was weak, but because she needed distance. She needed space from Celia. From the lies. From the suffocating noise closing in around her. Her eyes scanned the crowd. Her parents stood still. There were no gasps. No outrage. Not even surprise. Her mother nodded once toward Celia. She did it almost proudly. Evelyn let out a breath. It came out as a dry, soundless laugh. So this is why you invited me? She asked quietly. To humiliate me in front of everyone? Celia blinked. You needed to know. Evelyn nodded. Just once. You're right, she said. I did. She turned to her parents. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. And you? You knew? You approved? Her father opened his mouth. But her mother placed a hand on his arm. Evelyn, her mother said. She sounded calm as always. As if explaining the weather. What's done is done. That child is blood. It deserves its father's legacy. Evelyn stared. You mean, you want me to give up what Nathaniel left me? You don't need all of it. Her mother replied softly. Celia's raising the baby alone. She needs support. Funny, Evelyn thought. She didn't feel angry anymore. Not really. Not the kind of anger that burns hot. This was something else. It was colder. It was heavier. It was like the stillness of Silverhaven in winter, when the lake froze solid and silent. "Fine," she said. She turned and walked through the crowd. She passed stunned faces. She passed averted eyes. No one reached out. No one stopped her. As the front door shut behind her, Evelyn exhaled. It was the first real breath she had taken since the moment Celia spoke. She made it to her car. She sat behind the wheel. But she didn't start the engine. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel. Her lungs refused to draw in breath. Then, without warning, the tears came. They weren't sobs. They weren't shaking gasps. They came as silent, steady streams, like a faucet left running. The water was too clear to notice until the sink overflowed. She cried for Nathaniel. She cried for the child that would bear his name. She cried for the sister she once carried home from kindergarten. She had tied Celia's shoelaces. She had wiped popsicle from her cheeks. And most of all, she cried for herself. For the woman who once believed love was enough. For the woman who spent years stitching herself around someone who would only ever unravel her. But even as the tears fell, she didn't feel broken. She felt stripped, raw, exposed, but not destroyed. She wiped her face. Then she reached for her phone. She scrolled through her contacts. Then she tapped one name. "Julia," she said when the line picked up. Her voice was hoarse. "I need a lawyer." "I know someone," Julia said. Her voice was steady on the other end of the line. "She's tough as nails. She handles divorce and estate disputes." "But Evelyn, are you sure? Once you go down this path, there's no going back." "I don't want to go back," Evelyn replied. "I want to end this." That afternoon, Evelyn sat in a quiet office. Pale oak shelves lined the walls. Legal tomes filled the room with silent weight. Across from her sat Grace Halden. The attorney had sharp eyes and salt and pepper hair coiled into a no-nonsense bun. She looked like someone who had seen the worst in people. And she looked like someone who had beaten it in court. "Miss Monroe," Grace began. She had just finished scanning the summary Evelyn had provided. "What your family is planning is a soft heist. They're counting on your silence." "They miscalculated," Evelyn said. "Good," Grace replied. Her lips curved just slightly. "Let's talk facts. Did Mr. Hayes leave a will?" Evelyn pulled an envelope from her bag. She placed it gently on the desk. "Here." It was filed with a local attorney 2 years before his accident. Grace opened it. Her eyes moved quickly across the text. "Everything, the house, the investments, the savings, all left to you. No alternate heirs. No mention of a child." She nodded. "Legally, this is solid. No one can touch any of it, unless they prove the child is Mr. Hayes's biological son. And even then, only under very specific conditions. But he died before the child was even born," Evelyn said. "All they have are pictures. Claims. No medical proof. No DNA test. Then they have nothing," Grace said coolly. "Which means we force their hand. They either prove it, or they retract it, publicly." Evelyn's fingers curled lightly into fists in her lap. It wasn't rage she felt. It was resolve. That letter. Those photos. That smug little speech in the garden. None of it held up to the law. She didn't just have the right to be angry. She had power. "What's the next step?" she asked. "We draft a formal legal notice," Grace said. "Celia and your parents will have 30 days to respond with medical proof. If they fail to provide it, we initiate a defamation suit. And we prepare to file for attempted inheritance fraud." She paused. "And trust me, they won't want to go to court with me across the aisle." A week later, Celia received the notice. She didn't respond. Instead, she called Evelyn on a rainy Tuesday night. The wind rattled Evelyn's window panes like a warning. "You actually sent lawyers after me?" Celia hissed. I just wanted the truth to be known. I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," Evelyn interrupted. "You tried to ruin me. You used my grief like it was a stepping stone. It's Nathaniel's child." "Then prove it," Evelyn said. Her voice was like ice. "Take the DNA test. If the results say it's his, we'll talk. If not, you'll retract every lie you told in front of that crowd." Celia went silent. Then she hung up. Evelyn stared at the phone. She didn't tremble. She didn't panic. She stood up. She stepped onto the porch. She let the cold rain hit her face. It felt like a baptism in steel. No more tears. No more fear. She was no longer the Evelyn who waited in candlelight on their anniversary. She was the Evelyn who had survived the fire. And now, she was learning how to wield it. 1 week after Evelyn's legal notice went unanswered, there was still no DNA test. There was no apology, no explanation, just silence. And silence, Evelyn knew, was rarely a retreat. It was often a strategy. She wasn't about to sit and wait. That rainy afternoon, she returned to Nathaniel's old design loft. It was a modest studio above the old bookstore downtown. The space had been shuttered since the memorial. She still had the key, but she had never found the will to use it. Until now. The door creaked open. The scent of old paper and stale coffee greeted her. There was something softer underneath, cologne. Maybe, or memory. The place was frozen in time. His jacket still hung on the hook. A coffee mug sat beside a pile of rolled-up blueprints. It was half full and ringed in dust. Evelyn walked to the desk. Her fingers brushed the wood. A thin envelope slipped from between 2 sketchbooks. The paper had yellowed slightly. On the front, in Nathaniel's unmistakable handwriting, it read, "Only open if you still love me, NH." Her breath caught. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a folded letter. It was handwritten. The ink was familiar. So was the rhythm. It was the kind he used in college. Each word felt carefully weighed. Each stroke of the pen felt like it cost something. Evelyn, if you're reading this, it means I never had the chance to make things right. I don't know where to begin. Nothing I say will be enough. But you deserve the truth. Not the kind that hides behind silence. The real kind. The ugly kind. What happened with Celia wasn't love. It was weakness. I was drowning. You were still radiant. Still kind. Still too good for me. I felt like a man shrinking in your shadow. She approached me when we were arguing a lot. I felt useless. She made me feel needed. That's all it was. A lie I wanted to believe. But hear this. The child isn't mine. We were together only once. I was drunk. I hated myself afterward. Years ago, before IVF, I was diagnosed with near-zero fertility. I didn't tell you. I couldn't. I was ashamed. Even during treatment, doctors said my chances were almost non-existent. That's why IVF was our only hope. I was going to tell you everything. I even booked us a weekend away to talk. But then the accident happened. If you still love me, even a little, don't let them bury you in the fallout of my cowardice. Don't let Celia turn my mistake into your ruin. I was your greatest failure. But you were the best thing I ever had. N. Evelyn pressed the letter to her chest. She wasn't sure how long she stood there. She didn't cry. She didn't grieve. She just stood still. Finally, she exhaled. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't peace. But it was truth. And that was enough. The next morning, she handed the letter to Grace Halden. Along with it, she provided a notarized statement from Nathaniel's former fertility specialist. The diagnosis matched. The dates aligned. There was no possible way the child could be Nathaniel's, not biologically. Not legally. Grace glanced over the documents. She raised an eyebrow. We don't need court anymore. She said, we need an audience. No, Evelyn replied quietly. I want more than that. What more? Evelyn looked up. Her eyes were clear and steady. I want to hand her this letter. In front of everyone who believed her lies. The following Saturday, the entire town of Silverhaven gathered. It was for the annual autumn charity auction, the most anticipated event of the year. Faces old and new mingled under golden string lights. Wine glasses clinked. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Everyone was talking about the special guest expected to attend. Celia, the glowing mother-to-be, the center of town gossip, the so-called heir-bearer to Nathaniel Hayes's legacy. Evelyn arrived alone. She wore a simple black dress with a squared neckline. Her hair was pulled back. Her heels clicked with purpose. She walked through the crowd like a shadow cutting through fog. Heads turned. Some eyes widened. A few dropped quickly, pretending not to stare. In the far corner, Celia laughed with 2 local reporters. One hand rested lightly on her stomach. She wore white. Of course. A sanctified lie. Their eyes met. Celia's smile faltered, just for a second. Then it returned, wider and more artificial. "Evelyn," Celia called. Her voice was honeyed. "I didn't think you'd actually. I have a letter from Nathaniel." The words silenced everything. Not just Celia. The entire room stopped. It felt like someone had struck a match in the middle of a dry forest. Celia froze mid-step. Evelyn pulled a cream envelope from her clutch. She held it up. "You should read it," she said, out loud, "if you're brave enough." Celia let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, come on. This is ridiculous." But her hand still reached out. She took the letter and unfolded it slowly. Her eyes scanned the first line. Then the second. Her face began to change. What happened with Celia wasn't love. Celia blinked. Her smile dissolved. "We were together only once? The child isn't mine." Gasps spread through the crowd. Murmurs followed. One of the reporters began recording. Another scribbled furiously in a notebook. Celia looked up. Her face had gone pale. Her voice shook. "This can't be real. You made this up." Evelyn said nothing. She simply held out a second document, the signed letter from the fertility doctor. It was medical truth. It had the numbers, the diagnosis, the date. One of the council members stepped forward. "Miss Monroe, is this legitimate?" Evelyn met his gaze. "Yes, and notarized, and backed by medical records." She turned to Celia. "Would you like to provide a DNA test now? Or shall we move on to the part where you retract everything you said, publicly?" Celia opened her mouth, but no words came. Their mother tried to step forward. "Evelyn, this isn't." "No, Mother," Evelyn said. "It is." She turned to face the crowd. Her voice was calm. It was steady. "I lost my husband. Then I lost my family. And then I was almost forced to lose my name. But not today." She turned back to Celia. Her voice was quiet, but it was lethal. "You've lied. You've manipulated. You've stood on my grief like it was a platform. Now you get to live with the truth." She didn't wait for a response. Evelyn walked past her sister. She passed her mother's stunned silence. She passed the crowd. The eyes that once held pity now held something colder. Recognition. She stepped into the crisp evening air. And this time, she didn't look back. 2 days later, Celia quietly left town. There was no press release. No statement. Just silence. The article in the local paper read, "False inheritance claim exposed. A widow's fight for truth." Evelyn didn't read it. Julia gave her the highlights. She didn't need validation. Not anymore. That weekend, Evelyn sat on her porch with a cup of tea. She watched the lake reflect soft golds and grays. Her fingers traced the edges of a sketch for her new studio. She had named it Ash and Bloom, for what had burned. And for what had risen after. She smiled gently to herself. Not for revenge, not for victory, but for the quiet peace of having survived. Weeks passed. Celia disappeared from Silverhaven without a sound. There were no farewells, no explanations. The Monroe family pulled back from public life. Their once proud image slowly faded. Shame and newspaper headlines chipped away at what was left. Evelyn stayed, not to gloat, but to live. She opened a small design studio by the lake. She named it Ash and Bloom. It was a quiet tribute to what she had lost and to what she was rebuilding. With every logo she designed, with every project she completed, she rewrote her story. She no longer lived in the shadows. She moved in bold, intentional lines. One spring morning, she sat on her porch sipping tea. The lake shimmered in the soft sun. Trees rustled gently in the breeze. Birds chirped somewhere in the distance. Her fingers rested on her sketchpad. It was blank, but not empty. She closed her eyes, not to remember, but to breathe. No bitterness, no regret, just Evelyn, whole, still,